It's the 18th of December, and in Illinois, where we are, most guys are already in the place where they're storing their boats for the winter. Today, we're going to give you 6 tips that you should know before you put your boat to bed for the wintertime. Pay attention to these guys. Any one of them could cost you a lot of money come springtime when you pick your boat back up. We'll be back right after this. Guys, we're back. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Mark Fisher.
I'm Megan Fuller.
Megan, today, you know that I store boats here. I went from doing horses to storing boats in my arena.
Okay.
And so we've got about 12 to 15 boats in this arena behind us. And I've gotten pretty good at what do you need to do and what do you need to tell guys to do before they bring their boat in here to store it. Now, our boats that we store are protected from the weather. It's still not a warm environment,
Right.
but it is at least indoors. So we're gonna cover kind of both indoor and outdoor winter storage.
Okay.
But there's a few things that we need to go over. So tip number 1.
Water.
Water is 100%. You got that right off the bat. You need to make sure. Doesn't matter whether you're indoors or out, but you need to make sure that you're getting all the water out of your boat. Live wells, hoses, pumps, lower unit, any place that there could be water, you need to get that water out for obvious reasons.
Right.
You don't want that water to freeze, expand, and break things. I got to tell you, there are guys who will bring their boats in, and sure enough, if they don't have a little bit of water in their live well, if there's water in the live well, that means there's water in those hoses leading to the live well. And more importantly, there's water in those pumps that pump the water out, and that's where the water will expand and crack those pumps. So
I bet people don't even think about that part. They just
Well-
are like, oh, there's water in there.
And so you need to absolutely pump those live wells out. Make sure that that water's getting out of there so that there isn't any water in those live well pumps. Lower unit. Make sure you're lowering your motor so it's not tilted up, but it's tilted down so that all that water gets lowered out of that lower unit. Okay. What's the second tip, Megan?
The engine.
The engine. So we already talked about we want to lower the engine to make sure that any water has drained out of it.
Right.
But the other thing that you want to do with the engine is that you want to make sure that that engine is not covered. This is especially important for guys who keep their boats outside. A lot of guys will take that engine and they will almost vacuum seal it in a lot of plastic and things like that because they don't want any weather to get in on that engine.
Okay.
Covering the engine is fine, but you need to leave some places for air to vent into there. Moisture is a big problem in the wintertime in that temperatures change. You go from freezing to thawing to then freezing again, things
Right.
like that. And that moisture gets inside that engine, which starts that corrosion process. And so you want to leave some opening for air to be able to get some ventilation into that motor so that you're constantly letting any moisture kind of get out of there. Okay, so lower the engine. You can wrap it and cover it, but make sure that there's ventilation to that motor. What's the third point, Megan?
The wrap on the top of the boat.
I've seen guys that, especially when they're leaving their boat outside, they will take a big blue tarp, one of those tarps you get at Walmart,
Yeah.
and they will take that tarp, and what they're thinking, they're kind of using the whole, they see marinas that'll shrink wrap boats, and so they'll take a big blue tarp, they'll put it over their boat, they'll take bungee cords or rope or whatever, and strap that big blue tarp around their boat. Guys, Don't do that. One of the differences between those big blue tarps that you get at Walmart and the blue plastic that marinas use for shrink wrapping, those blue tarps from Walmart, they actually have threads that go through them.
Right.
So those tarps, when that's laying against your fiberglass and the wind is blowing that tarp, you come back in the spring and all of a sudden you take that tarp off and everything looks clean because, boy, that tarp did a great job at keeping all the weather off of the inside of your boat, except the outside of your boat, the fiberglass, is all scratched up. And it's scratched not like deep scratches, but just where it's almost like sandpaper rubbing against your fiberglass all winter long.
Right.
Don't use those blue tarps to cover your boat. If you do, put some kind of a cloth over it first to where anything that's touching the fiberglass is actually cloth, and then your tarp is on top of your cloth. Don't put that tarp right up against your fiberglass. What's the next tip, Megan?
Fuel.
Fuel. This is a big one too. I can't tell you how many times I see this happen. Guys will come in, they'll drop their boat off here, and hey, Mark, just before I leave, I got my boat all put away. I got my cover on it and everything, but let me put some fuel stabilizer into the fuel tank. Guys, if you're putting fuel stabilizer in here, you're too late. You need to put that fuel stabilizer in the fuel before you run your last time. Having that fuel stabilizer in the fuel tank, that's doing one thing, but it's not doing the most important thing. You want that fuel that's in your motor, that's in your lines, that's getting to your carburetor. You want that to have your stabilizer because that's where you're, again, preventing that moisture. And so you need to put that fuel stabilizer in your tank on your second to the last fishing trip. Fish all day for a couple of days or whatever, run that motor with that fuel stabilizer, then top off your tank and then bring it into me or go and store it or whatever. Don't put the fuel stabilizer in after you've shut your motor off and you're done for the year.
So these boats all have fuel in them?
They all have fuel in them, and what I would recommend is that you top off your fuel tank before you store it. I know there's two ways of looking at it, either empty it all the way down or store it all the way up. The whole point about that, Megan, is again, if your fuel tank is half full, that leaves airspace for that moisture, that condensation to get in there. If your fuel tank is filled up, you don't have that space, you don't have to worry about it. So that's just typically the way I do it. I fill it up, but again, I run that fuel stabilizer 2 or 3 times, well, 2 or 1 time before I get done and store it.
Okay.
What's the second to the last tip?
Batteries.
Batteries. One of the things the guys love most about storing their boats here, they don't take their batteries out of their boats. This arena's got outlets every 10 feet, and every one of these boats in here is plugged in, and those chargers charge their batteries throughout the winter. Now, what I will do is I don't keep them on the entire winter. I'll come in here once a week and I'll rotate. So Joe's boat has the battery charger on this week, while Sam's boat has the battery charger unplugged. That'll let those batteries drain a little bit in a week, and then I come in and flip-flop. And then Sam's boat gets them and Joe's boat doesn't. That way we're constantly charging those batteries, but also letting them drain just a little bit to recharge, things like that. I'm not running the charging units for 3 months straight, but I'm also making sure that those batteries always have a constant charge to them. That way you avoid having to take the batteries out. You keep those batteries in that same condition that they're in during the summer months. Guys, keep in mind, I read online that a battery can lose 30 to 60% of its charge in temperatures of 32 degrees or lower. So you do, I know that a lot of people will take their batteries out of their boat, store them in the house or in the basement or things like that for the winter. I would just assume most bass boats have onboard chargers. I would just assume leave it all in and just make sure that I'm using that onboard charger throughout the winter to keep those batteries at a good charge.
Okay.
And what's our last tip?
Like mothballs or dryer sheets.
The old mothballs or dryer sheet to keep the mice out of the boat. Well, the reality is that I'm not telling you that it is a foolproof way to keep mice out. I have been in situations where I've had mothballs or dryer sheets in certain places, and those mice still go there. Believe me, in the wintertime, they don't like dryer sheets or mothballs. I'm sure of that. But they absolutely like a warm place to live in the wintertime. And if your boat is that warm place, they'll put up with the stink of the mothballs or the dryer sheet if that's the warm place to live. But here's the way I look at it. If they've got a warm place to live over here where there isn't mothballs, and they got a warm place to live in your boat where there is mothballs, they'd prefer to live where there isn't. So I would put them in anyway, just to try and make it less appealing for them to be in.
Okay.
So I'm still, even though I understand that it isn't foolproof, I think it's worth doing. And my guys all do that here, and I've had very few issues with anybody complaining about mice getting in. The guys who do complain about mice getting in are the guys that didn't use the mothballs or the dryer sheets. Like I said, hey, we'll go stay in that guy's boat because he didn't put them in this year, right?
Right. Lesson for next year.
Right.
Guys, we hope you liked this video. If so, please give us a thumbs up and either write your comments, explain how you winterize your boat, and maybe something Mark missed. And please subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Thanks.
So those are our 6 tips for storing your boat in the winter. I hope if you haven't done so already, that you follow those tips before you get your boat all bundled up and put away for the wintertime. If you have and you forgot one of them, better get over there and get that taken care of. We've got another episode coming up tomorrow. We'll see you then.
Stay channeled.